So today I'm here with Rick Pamplin. He's a really experienced writer, producer, director. Recently produced and directed the feature Movie Money Confidential, documentary on film finance. So, Rick, having such an extensive background, directing, producing, writing, what, why did you decide to do a documentary on film finance?
Well, it was a bit of a Hail Mary pass. I got into a difficult point in my career. Most movie careers don't just, start and then they ascend and you keep ascending. There's a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of unemployment. I had grown up in Michigan as a kid, loving the movies, went out to Hollywood. I had done some work for CBS News. I had also edited a newspaper for University of Michigan, had some success, thought, well, I can go to Hollywood. I ended up getting 2 degrees. I started off as an actor
Mm,
and did that for about a year. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. No one would read my scripts. No one would talk to me. Doors slammed in my face. Nobody would pick up the phone call. So I ended up homeless, and I lived in a Chevy Nova in the parking lot of a grocery store in Santa Monica. I always saw these stories, Jason, on the news where the homeless people in New York would sleep on the grates because the warm air would come up.
yeah.
So the first night I went down to a mission in downtown Los Angeles, and you had to listen to a sermon, and then you got the worst watered down soup ever, and then they gave you a cot, and they said, sleep on your valuables and don't trust anybody. And I thought, wait a minute, I live in Los Angeles. I have a vehicle. I can go to the beach. So I ended up going out to Santa Monica. And so I set up shop for about 90 days and sold blood. I never begged or stole money, and lived on a few dollars a day. And eventually you go to everything that's for free. You Shakespeare in the Park, poetry readings, the LA Free Clinic open house. All these things served refreshments. So I would get free food. And one of the things I went to was an introduction to screenwriting class at a place called Sherwood Oaks Experimental College. And I was there for the cookies. I mean, I wasn't there and so they said, anybody here ever written a script, or anybody here ever had an agent? Raise my hand. Anybody here ever sold anything? Raise my hand. Could we see you out in the lobby? And I was like, oh, it's an intro class. They're going to throw me out. No cookies tonight. So what happened was the teacher had gotten a job to write a screenplay at 20th Century Fox. And he couldn't teach the class, but they had a full classroom of students. So they said, could you teach screenwriting? And I went, well, I don't know anything about teaching screenwriting. And they said, well, you have a degree in it, right? Yeah, yeah. I used to teach Sunday school in Michigan when I was a kid. So they hired me as a teacher, and I started teaching screenwriting. And I figured, I better figure out what am I going to teach these guys? And in
Right.
the process of teaching screenwriting for 9 years, I opened every door in Hollywood, and I sold scripts to Disney and Warner Brothers, and I opened up doors. I had everybody come speak at my classes, and I eventually did seminars. And Sherwood Oaks eventually went out of business, and Loyola Marymount University had me teach. And then I went to University of Southern California, also called University of Spoiled Children, supposedly the best film school in the country. And so for 9 years, I developed my craft and learned how to write screenplays and sell screenplays and get into studios. And most of the stuff I sold was the movie studio.
Wow.
But I wasn't really happy. So I was really wanted to write and direct and have creative control. And when you are a screenwriter in Hollywood, there's a very famous saying, which is writers create, writers don't control. So it evolved, and I don't want to give you too long an answer, but that's kind
Yeah.
of how I got started.
Okay. So, when did you make the transition, or how did you make the transition from screenwriter to producing and directing?
Well, it's interesting. I became known as a screenwriter and a screenwriting teacher, and I made an independent, low budget film called Provoked. And we shot it in like 8 days for $100,000. It was kind of a feminist Die Hard. It was kind of like a woman with a machine gun rescuing her husband type thing. And
Nice.
the picture did extremely well. At the time, Blockbuster was king, and every Blockbuster had it. We sold it to United Artists Pay-Per-View, which was one of the very first streaming sites. It was on Showtime. I got like 9 Drive-In Academy Award nominations from Joe Bob Briggs. And there was this whole video revolution going on. And, you know, people look down their nose at direct-to-video. But direct-to-video really opened up opportunities for people to make independent films and to let new people in. So I sort of slipped in with that. So with the success of making a lot of money, selling scripts to the studios, and having made an independent film, I had also worked briefly with John Cassavetes on a film. I had worked with a lot of people I really admired, and John is one of the people I most admired and loved in my life. And so there was a sort of a family tragedy, and I had to relocate my mother to Florida. And I didn't know anything about Florida. You know, I had every cliche and stereotype in my mind. And so I went down to Florida, and Universal and Disney had opened up studios. Well, that's the one thing I knew how to do, was go talk to a studio. So I got wined and dined by Disney, and got not wined and dined, but a serious offer was made by Universal Studios. So I moved in 1994 to Universal Studios Florida and hung up a thing and said, I'm a movie producer now, and I'm a writer director, and people believed it. So that's how I started. And then I remember the very first day, they gave me an office, a file cabinet, a desk and a chair and a telephone. And I remember going, now what do I do? So I just started calling everybody I knew. And it took about 3 years. And I did a picture called Michael Winslow Live. And Michael Winslow was the only movie star that lived in Orlando. And I thought, well, why not work with what's here? And so I met with Michael and his manager. Michael wanted to do a toboggan movie. And I was like, well, this is Florida. I don't know if that's really what we want to do. So he invited me to go see him in a nightclub. And he did this incredible show with the sound effects. You know, he was at the height of his success with Police Academy. And I went backstage in his dressing room. He said, how did you like the show? I said, I love it, but this is a show that's family friendly, but families don't go to nightclubs, you know? And I said, you want to make a movie of your show. And he liked the idea. So we developed the concept, Michael Winslow Live, and we shot it at Universal Studios with 3 different audiences. We filmed it 3 times, about 500 people. We filmed it on 35 millimeter Panavision. It was my first DGA, Directors Guild of America film. I had an IATSE crew. I mean, all of a sudden, you know, here's a guy living in a car, you know, in a grocery store parking lot in Santa Monica. And now all of a sudden, you know, I'm in the Directors Guild, and I've got IATSE, and I've got a crew, and, you know, these wonderful, talented people. And I'm on a Universal soundstage, and Universal's ushering in 500 people in the audience. And so we did the picture. It did really, really well. We had a lot of theatrical offers. And, you know, I definitely want to get into whatever you want to get into the show, but the real key to this business is figuring out how to get the money. Which anybody can raise money. Okay. Anybody can make a movie, but there's very few of us that can get the money back.
Right. That is a huge point. That is a huge point, because and so many filmmakers, especially new filmmakers, like we're tunnel vision. We just want to get the movie made, and, you know, get the movie made, get it financed, we get paid a little bit. But if the movies aren't making money on the back end, it's a house of cards, right?
Well, we had an interesting. This was my first big film, so I'd done the straight to video. By the way, and I have to tell you this, Provoked was made for about $100,000. When we went into post, the distributor said, I will front you the first 30,000. I want to upgrade some of your post-production, some of your stuff. And so the picture was about 130,000 out the door, about 100,000 investment. The picture did over $5 million. So it was like a 50 to 1 ROI. Wow. And that kind of gave me a buzz and a sense of, this guy can make a picture that makes money.
Right. And now, I'm not to interrupt, but was Provoked, was that equity financed? Was it private financing?
Yeah, it was private investors.
Okay.
Basically, it was students out of my film class. This is what it was. And friends of theirs. Okay. And anybody that I could get, that I could talk. I had no idea what I was doing.
Multiple investors.
I'm sorry?
Multiple investors.
Yeah, not a lot, but a few. Okay. And I was able to get a distribution deal. Again, all my skills at learning to go pitch Warner Brothers, Disney, whatever. And I have to give a lot of credit. I met a guy named Robert Cosberg. And early on, Bob and I became partners. And he would come to my classes and he would talk about what the studios wanted to buy. Like, don't do this genre, do this story. And I would then teach the students and work up the ideas. Then at the end of the class, Bob would come. And the ones that had great ideas, we would take into the studios. So over that 9 years, I had about 1,500 students. We sold over 65 scripts, most of them to movie studios. Hard to Kill, the only good Steven Seagal movie, was written in my class. I eventually did an intro and a workshop. And Stephen McKay, a very talented guy, the script was even much better than the movie.
I'm sure.
It's called 7 Year Itch. But it was a fantastic project. And Bruce Malmuth, who directed it, came to my class. And it really was one of the most successful projects we did. But there was another movie that a woman made called Closet Land, which Brian Grazer came to my class, and she was able to pitch it. And so it was a very exciting time. But I learned sort of the lingo of Hollywood. And it's really who you know. And it's the networking and the connections. So Bob and I worked on a number of movies. He worked at a company called De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, and they raised $400 million. I think they made one good movie, Blue Velvet. I think the rest of them were terrible. They lost all the money. And then he went to a company called Goober Peters. And Bob became vice president of Goober Peters of development. And that then opened Warner Brothers. And then I was part of the Goober Peters family. And I was able to sell them scripts. I was able to bring students to Warner Brothers to pitch projects. So it was pretty exciting. The flaw in all that, you can make a lot of money. I had a nice 6-figure income. And you can go to the Oscars. You can go to lunch in the executive dining room. You can walk. Richard Burton was shooting a movie. And I loved Richard Burton. And I used to wear a blue blazer and, khaki pants. And I looked kind of preppy. And I just walked on. The elephant door was open. I walked on. I wanted to watch Richard Burton. And I had a Warner Brothers tag, so they just assumed I was an executive at Warner Brothers watching them film Exorcist 3. It was just like, so I would walk around the back lot at Warner Brothers, and anytime I could walk onto somebody's set and watch them make a movie. And by the way, I recommend that highly. Yesterday I spoke to the National Association of Broadcasters and on a panel about how people get in the business. Number one, you need education. You've got to understand a lot about film, but you've got to have experience. You've got to be on movie sets. I was a boom guy. I was a production assistant. John Cassavetes almost got me killed on a movie. We did whatever we had to do to make the movie. But I've been on a John Cassavetes set. I've been on a Marty Scorsese set. I've been on a lot of these movie sets. I've been on a Jim Cameron set. And you watch, they all work different. They all have different approaches. The crews are different. And I had a friend of mine that was on a Marty Scorsese movie that he was a camera operator. So he smuggled me in to kind of look in the back, behind his shoulder, watch the whole process. And it was a picture with De Niro. And it was fascinating to watch those two work. I'm a big believer on get on every set you can. I don't care if you're an extra. I don't care if you're a PA. I don't care if you're an intern. I did my internship when I was doing my master's degree on a movie called Fist. and I read lines with Rod Steiger. Rod Steiger didn't get along well with an actor in a scene, and I had studied acting. So here's Academy Award-winner Rod Steiger, In the Heat of the Night, all these great movies. And he says to me, "Kid, can you read lines?" So we'd go behind the flats and he would pace back and forth and we would read the lines. Well, he went to Norman Jewison, the director, and said, "I want this kid," meaning me, "in the scene with me." And I had like long hair and a beard. I was like a hippie, And so Jewison said, "Can you act?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And it was to play a legislative aide whispering in Rod Steiger's ear, basically giving him the lines. And he and I had such a rapport reading lines that they pulled the actor up. And I remember I ran to the dressing room and said, "Cut this hair off, get me." And it was a period thing. It was a Jimmy Hoffa story, basically.
Yeah.
And so I went out and I'm in, and here's Laszlo Kovacs, who's the DP, giving me directions. Norman Jewison, who made one of my favorite movies of all time, The Thomas Crown Affair, directing me. And again, how does this stuff happen? Because I'm sitting in a chair and Rod Steiger goes, "Kid, can you run lines with me?" I mean, it being on set leads to incredible opportunities, incredible know-how, and networking. So you have education, you have experience, but you got to have networking, and you must develop. And when I was a kid, Jason, I was a sickly kid. I spent a lot of time in a hospital. I wasn't supposed to live long. I had a lot of things wrong with me, and I didn't have a necessarily good personality, and I had sort of a dark film noir view of the world, and I was attracted to the really dark stuff. And I sort of developed the personality I'm exhibiting today over many years, because when I went out to Hollywood, I was like, Marlon Brando, we're all method actors, fuck you, James Dean, all that stuff. And it works if you're Marlon Brando, but it doesn't necessarily work as the business evolved. The business became much more corporate and much more mainstream. And so, in 1976, they made Chinatown, or actually 73, I think. They never would make Chinatown. The artists and the creative people that sort of ran Hollywood and did great movies in the late 60s and early 70s were being replaced by corporations and corporate interests, and guys in Armani suits with slick back hair who would stand on the set and tell you how to make a movie, which is why a lot of directors left the studios. So you've got to go through this process, and you don't have to move to Hollywood, but get on the sets. Almost everything that's happened to me has happened because of friendships with people, or people that I worked with or befriended said, "Hey, Rick is a stand-up guy." And, I've been smeared on the internet. One of the great tragedies of the internet is when you cast movies and people don't get cast in those movies, they don't say nice things about you on the internet.
Right.
And, I'd like to see 100 actors for every speaking part I cast. And all of these are through SAG. There's casting directors and agents and stuff. And we videotape everything. And we're very fair. But when somebody's kid doesn't get cast, they make it their mission to try to smear you on the internet. So, the business is always evolving. It's always changing. There is a definite dark side. One of the reasons I like to do, podcasts like this, I just like to tell people, this is what works. This is what doesn't work. You can do it. And back to your original question, just to quickly answer. We were sued by one investor in 3 different projects. And we were tied up for 5 years in court. We spent over $50,000 out of pocket defending ourselves legally. The lawyer said, "Oh, just bankrupt these 3 projects. You've got so many projects." I said, "Yeah, but the other investors will lose their investment. And you don't want to go bankrupt because you lose all your projects and all your equity." Right. And I said, I don't want to do that. So I took the hard road. But while you're being sued, and by the way, the more successful you are, the more you're going to be sued. You're
Yeah,
sued more on successful projects than unsuccessful projects.
totally.
My friends that did the Blair Witch Project, I think they had 35 nuisance lawsuits. And sometimes you just settle those because it's cheaper than litigating.
Yeah.
Plus, who wants to be in court for 5 years? You want to make movies.
Yep.
So I had been sued by this particular very wealthy person. And it really, I don't know to this day why, but there are crazy allegations, 9 counts, 3 lawsuits. We went through the process for 5 years and we won. Everything was dismissed. Or, oh, you should countersue. And I'm like, nah, I don't want to be a guy that sues people. I want to be a filmmaker.
Right.
So in that 5 years, I lost almost every friend. People quit calling me back. People quit returning emails. And you find out who your real friends are when you're down and out.
Totally.
And so I was pretty desperate. And I had borrowed money to live on because I also wasn't working. So I went for about 5 years. I'm paying out $50,000 plus in legal fees, and I'm borrowing, living off credit cards. So Louise Levison called me. I don't know if you're familiar with this book, Filmmakers and Financing.
Yes.
But she's done 9 editions. It's been out there for 28 years. And she called me up and she wanted to have lunch. And I'm like, I'm going back to that surly personality I used to have. So we go to lunch and she goes, I want to write about you in my new book. And luckily, my wife, who was a producer on my last film, and was there to kind of buffer some. And I'm just sitting there going, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to be in her new book. I'm a failure. I'm a loser. I'm washed up. And all those things we all think. Mm. And so Louise starts talking to me and I blurt out, I don't know why. I say, I want to make a movie out of your book. I said, I think we can make a movie and it's going to be my comeback, blah, 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 blah. And I do this pitch and I totally unpremeditated. So she kind of looks at it, picks at her salad or sandwich, whatever. She goes, can I get another Diet Coke? I said, yeah, sure. Here, waitress. Yeah. And I said, by the way, I'll buy lunch if you agree to this. And she goes, okay, I trust you. And that's how I got the book, which is the inspiration for the movie. I've acquired the rights to make her book into a movie. It's going to be the inspiration for this movie. I want to call it Movie Money Confidential. And I want to just tell people the truth. I'm so tired of the hype and all. And I said, I've been on all night and I can't find anything to teach people how to raise money. You can go to film school. You can run up $100,000 in student loans. You can get a degree and nobody ever tells you how to get the money.
Yeah.
Nobody ever tells you what you need to know. And I said, I want to make a movie about all the stuff they don't teach in film school. The truth. And I don't care. He goes, well, what's the film going to be? I go, I don't know. I don't even know who's going to talk to me. Would anybody even tell me? Because one of the biggest things, Jason, and this is important for your listeners to know. When I was teaching screenwriting, a lot of people hated me. Now, a lot of people love to come and speak at my classes. I would call up every successful screenwriter. And there were great people that came and spoke. Larry Lasker and Walter Parks, when they wrote War Games, they were wonderful. Babaloo Mandel and his partner, when they wrote Splash. And they would come and give the script and they would talk to the students. And it was just wonderful. And other people, I would call them up and go, what the hell are you doing? I said, well, I'm teaching a screenwriting class. You're an idiot. We found a map that leads us to a gold mine, and you're showing other people how to find it. You're wising up chumps. I hate you. I will never speak at your class. So it was very interesting to me. About half the people in the industry refused. And other people, like Brian Grazer, different people that came were wonderful. Bob Cosper. Yeah. And they wanted to share their knowledge because we wanted to make better movies. And we wanted the best movies to be made. But some people were very territorial. And this is something you must understand. You have when I studied in my master's screenwriting, one of the great things you learn in writing is motivation. Everybody thinks characters. Where did you go to school? Who are your parents? What kind of clothes do you wear? Yeah, that stuff the director will decide. And all that gets cut out anyway. None of that ends up in them. here's what determines character in a great movie. All right. You figure out what motivates that person. That's what every great actor, I've worked with some really, really great actors, and they want to understand the motivation of the character. They don't care where they went to school or where they grew up or what their parents or what Holden Caulfield called all that David Copperfield type of stuff. That's not important. What's important is what motivates people. So in your career, and to all the people who watch your podcast, study the motivations of the people that are trying to help you. Are they trying to make a quick buck? Are they trying to exploit you? Are they trying to twist and change your material? What are they really trying? Are they trying to attach themselves to your talent and suck the life out of it? And it's tough, because if you go through and you find 10 or 20 great friends in your career, you're above average.
Yeah.
So I was down to less than 10 people that would even talk to me after all the stuff I'd done. Hit movies. I was president of 2 distribution companies. I taught for 9 years. And I had the same thing happen. Jason, I had a student sell a script, and they get like a big deal. One of my students got a 3-picture deal at Paramount based on a script they did in my class. So I'd call them up and say, hey, would you come back and talk to the students? Hell no. Why would I do? I paid you for the class. Don't ever call me again. I don't want to wise up these kids. They're my competition. And I'm like, well, I don't know. If you're that insecure, but this is an attitude you've got to look out for, because they don't want other people to know. When we were making the movie, 80% of the people, the Movie Money Confidential, 80% of the people we called did not want to talk to us. They don't want to tell you how to raise money. They don't want to give away the secrets. Investors don't want to be on camera because they don't want to be deluged by other filmmakers.
Right.
It's very hard, very, very hard to get the money and to get people to do the movie. The first guy we went to was the guy who backed the Blair Witch Project. And one of the things we do in our movies, we expose the Blair Witch Project, the truth about it.
Okay.
90% of everything you've heard or read about Blair Witch is not true. Louise Levison wrote the business plan. There was no script. There were no actors. And we put on camera the real budget and the real business plan.
Okay.
Blair Witch. And we tell that true story. Because one of the problems is, for beginning filmmakers or struggling filmmakers, there's so much misinformation. And now you're going down this rabbit hole of propaganda that's just nonsense.
Right.
It's self-serving nonsense. Okay.
And I would assume that's a similar story to say, like Clerks, we made it, or Paranormal Activity. They were made for $10,000 or $20,000, but not counting all the money the studio put in, sound mix, putting out stuff like that.
Call a lab and ask them how much to deliver. Call an insurance. Let me tell you, you're absolutely right, Jason. But this is so simple to disprove. Call up an insurance agency and find out what is E&O insurance for a feature film. Time magazine claimed the Blair Witch Project was made for $35,000, and they published it on the cover. It's completely not true. So we dispel that whole mythology. So we just thought, well, let's go to the Blair Witch guy. We know him. I know the 5 guys that made it. I know the guy that funded it. So we call him up, and Scott calls him, and he knows me and he knows Louise. The Blair Witch guys used to use my office at Universal to raise money. And I would let them. I liked them. I'm very good friends with Dan. And I know the other ones, and I know some of them pretty well. And Greg Hale, I know really well, and Dan, and they're good guys. And I had this big office with leather couches in a corner office. And so they would use it to raise money for their project. And we shared the same lawyer. And so when they did the Blair Witch thing, it's driven me nuts for all these years. And Louise, why not just tell the truth? See, my thing is tell people the truth. And what I resent, and I looked at all you go to film school, what do they teach you? Writing and directing. Do they teach you script supervising? Do they teach you how to deal with labor unions? Do they teach you how to deliver a film? Do they teach you how to raise the money for the film? Do they teach you how to find a good entertainment lawyer? Do they teach you how to protect yourself in litigation? They don't really teach you much. They teach you how to be like, oh, I'm going to be a director. Oh, I'm going to be a writer. And something like 90% of all film school graduates are unemployed working in another field.
Mm.
And so I think education's great, but you need a lot more than education to figure this business out. And I really honestly believe I've only figured this business out in the last couple of years to really come on a show like this and say what I'm saying to you. So
Right.
I called Scott. We went to the Blair Witch guy. He said, fine. How much money? We told him X number of dollars. He said, great, no problem. I'll fund the movie. So we went back to the restaurant. I'm still living on credit cards. I buy Louise Levison another lunch. I say, hey, we got the money. Wasn't this great? The guy calls back and he says, I've changed my mind. I'm putting it all into marijuana factories. Marijuana is going to go legal, and I'm putting all my money in that. We said, well, do you want a diverse board? But no, I don't. It took us 2 years after that to raise the money. 2 years. Wow. And Scott talks. So when we made the film, there's a film within the film. We actually are raising money for the film while we're making the film. That's we smart. Film pitch meetings. We film us going to real investors. And then we said to our investors, if you invest in the movie, you have to go on camera and say why. Well, there went half of our potential investors. Right. But we actually have real investors telling on camera why they invested in our movie, which is pretty unique. So so the film has done really well. And so Scott was a stand-up guy. One connection that I made at Universal Studios in Orlando, that I reached out to him, and he produced it with my wife. I didn't produce, I was just writer-director. And the pictures come out. It was released in March. The last time I looked, we had an 86 critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes and 100% audience. It's the most successful film I've ever done. I talked to the distributor 2 days ago. It's overperforming in every market. We've sold like half a dozen streaming sites. We're on 14 digital downloads. We've sold 2 foreign territories, and we're just rolling the picture out. What I love about the picture, and if you don't have money and you're watching this podcast, here's a secret. Go get a library card, sign up for Hoopla, and you can go to Hoopla and watch the movie for free. Now, if you have a few bucks and you've got a big screen TV and you want to see it in HD, because the picture is beautifully filmed and great sound, then go to Amazon and you can either buy it or you can rent it in HD, and it's fantastic. But if you're on a budget, which I'm very sensitive to because I was and have been, anybody can see our movie on Hoopla. And I'm so proud of that because I love Hoopla and I love that they make films available for people. And all you need is a library card and you can sign. And by the way, Hoopla is a great channel, great, art films, whatever. So you don't have to go out and pay these streaming people enormous amounts of money and have a limited, viewership. You can go out and have an incredible library with Hoopla. So what we tried to do was tell the truth, which is the most dangerous thing in the world you can do. Right? I'm against war. I'm against starvation. But if you go look at history, the people that are opposed to war, most of them were assassinated. Jesus was crucified. Gandhi was murdered. John Lennon was murdered. The most dangerous thing you can say in this world is let's have nonviolence and let's stop war. Well, in my career, the most dangerous thing you can do is tell the truth, whether you're teaching, whether you're doing a seminar, whether I'm doing a podcast. And I'll tell you, it's been radio silence since the movie came out. People are afraid to say anything. The audiences love the film. Critics have liked the film. But it's really interesting. The industry, I'm sure, is very unhappy. They don't want your viewers and listeners to understand how it works, because then they are kind of giving up the power. This is fantastic. The fact that you talk about movies and money, which hardly anybody does, you have a great take on all that. Yeah. And I'll do anything I can to support you or help any of your people. Awesome. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter. And anybody that follows me, I have an open DM. I talk to people every day and try to help them with their advice. On LinkedIn, I've got like 1,000 connections. On Twitter, I've got like 150,000. And, sometimes it takes me a few days to get back to people, but I try to send them in the right direction, or I try to give them answers. And so many people out there need what you're doing on this podcast. They need real, honest information, and they need people that will tell the truth and help them. Because here's where we are. Since the pandemic, the whole business is in free fall. The studios are consolidating. And here's what it is. People are tired of paying a premium and having their choices limited. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening now are these fast channels are coming up. I don't know if you're, Tubi.
Yeah.
Our film just got, Tubi is, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this.
Yeah.
I go ahead. I'm sorry. What?
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I like living a little on the edge, so we'll take a little chance. But we made a deal with it. Tubi has a new site coming out called Docurama, which are the best documentaries ever made. And we're on it. I'm so thrilled. I'm honored to be on it. And there's another one coming out too. And there's these other channels, these fast channels. People are saying, we'd rather watch movies with commercials and have choice than spend $400 a month on all these premium channels and not have a lot of choice. And that's a huge seismic shift in the ground underneath us.
And it's happened so fast in like the last 2 years. And absolutely. I mean, I see on my library in particular, my revenue from SVOD and AVOD is like done a 180. Like now I make the bulk of my money on AVOD channels, and then SVOD is way down. And then
exactly
TVOD. Yeah.
Yes. You said it better than I did, but yes, that's what's happening. The other thing that's happening, and I want to speak to your audience. I have a lot of friends that have gone to YouTube. And in the beginning, YouTube was our enemy because they stole our films and they put commercials on them and they wouldn't take them down and we didn't get the revenue. But they've evolved. And YouTube today is a great showcase for short films, independent films. I have friends of mine that are making 6 figures monetizing their films on YouTube.
Yeah, and I believe it.
When you look at TikTok, when you look at YouTube, and you go, now, wait a minute, you can make a film and get monetized per view, which I think is about 18 cents once you qualify. I have friends of mine that dropped out and became nomads. This whole movement, there's 2 million people now living in RVs or vans.
Oh, yeah. I have a buddy that's getting ready to do that.
Yeah. And they're making videos. And they're making $100,000 a year, making a 20-minute video that they edit on their laptop, and they put it out once a week on YouTube. I have many, many friends doing this, and I want to encourage this. And I want to encourage filmmakers to monetize themselves. It's interesting. It's a long story, but I wrote a chapter in Louise's new book. So I got approached by a book publisher to write a book. So I started looking around. So I called a friend of mine that's an agent in New York. My agent that had been with me my whole life died about 3 years ago. And he was Mike Hammelberg, one of the greatest agents ever. He sold Taxi Driver. He produced the Yakuza with Robert Mitchum, and Sidney Pollack was the producer. And Mike was this dear friend of mine. So I called this literary agent and I said, I want to write a book about my experiences in Hollywood. And I have a film now that's successful. And I'm in Louise's book and I have a film making money. And I want to tell people how I did it. All the living in my car, being sued, all the bad things, but you can survive that. And here are the mistakes I made. Here's a lot of my tips. So the agent loved the book, blah, 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 blah. So I get the stuff from the agent on how to present my book. Guess what the first thing they want to know is, what platforms are you on? What's your social media? How many people can you draw to this book?
Yeah.
So I have like 145,000 people on Twitter. I have like 1,000 connections on LinkedIn. My movie company has 88,000 followers on Twitter. This is how you sell a book now.
Yeah.
So what's happening, Jason, is post-pandemic world is all of the old business models of Hollywood don't work. They don't work. And they quit making romantic comedies. They don't want independent films. They want cartoon movies. They want Spider-Man 19. And they want to do repetitive, formulistic things. And I want to say one other thing, because I was angry about this for a long time. When I worked at the studios, there were 7 major studios, and they all wanted the same type of film. There couldn't be a female lead. You couldn't have a positive black role model.
Yeah.
The antagonist, by and large, was a young black male. That you would go into these meetings, they go, well, Russia's the villain in this, and they would demonize and villainize. And Hollywood, when I was there, was a racist, sexist, misogynistic place that controlled a lot of the culture. And it was very unfair. And even though I'm a white male, and I guess benefited from that, I wanted other voices. When I want to watch a movie, I don't want to see another Spider-Man movie. It just isn't my thing. I saw the first one, fine. But, I want to see independent cinema. I want to see different voices. I want to see something original. And one of the things that my distributor said to me the other day is originality is really what's going to reign. And my lawyer said the same thing. I have this really great, successful lawyer in LA. And he said originality always wins out. And he represents a lot of documentary filmmakers. I think they've won the Academy Award like 3 of the last 5 years with clients. And he said, the key is originality. And I'm now living in a world where I want to tell a story that hasn't been told. Yeah. I don't want to do stereotypes. When I went out and set out to do this movie, I had no idea what people were going to say. We had 7 investors cancel on one day. They were afraid to go before the camera. They didn't want to talk about money. Money's a weird subject people don't like to talk about. But we struggled through it. We shot 100 hours of footage. We interviewed 60 people. The first cut was like 3 hours. So I sat in the editing room and I cut and I cut and I cut. And it runs now an hour 41. And we had offers from everybody. When we took the picture to market, and some of the biggest names, household names. And I had films, for example, on Netflix, and they had misspelled my name. On some films, they didn't put the director. I had no control over the synopsis of my movie or the copy that was selling my movie. And it wasn't even my movie. It was just some generic nonsense. And it was a very frustrating process. And Netflix is distributed in the old system, DVD and on streaming, 4 of my films. And I just got to a point where I don't want to do Netflix. I'm not interested in this anymore. What's the point of 2 years raising the money, making the film for 6 months, doing all the work we did, and then they just throw it up against the wall. They don't promote it. They don't publicize it. You don't control the artwork. You don't control the copy. As the filmmaker, they're like keeping me from my audience. Well, that's what I like about YouTube and other platforms. And we went with a small distributor named KDMG, Kazmarek Digital Media Group. And they're the greatest people I've ever worked with in my life. 2 of them worked at Warner Brothers, but they're 6 years old, but they really get digital. They really get streaming. They really get foreign. And they kind of get that DVDs are over. They kind of get the theatrical experience for the moment isn't there. And so they focus on these other things. So we went to market and we got 14 great streaming, opportunities on video on demand. And it's been a great experience. They said, can we see your poster art? Then they said, can you do a horizontal? They said, this is great. We're going to use it. Then they said, can you write up sort of the basic press release on your movie? And I did. And so we worked together. And I really recommend to your audience, forget the big guys.
Yeah.
They're just going to steamroll right over you. You need to find a small distributor like KDMG that loves great movies, and they don't particularly do exploitation or horror. They're interested in more quality, type stuff. And they love the originality of the film, and they embraced it. And to me, as a filmmaker, at this point in my career, to go out and raise the money and work myself for at least a year making the film, and then hand it to somebody that just doesn't get it, and I have no say. That was the frustration with the movie studios. Mm-hmm. You work on a script, you do this great project, and you turn it in, and then it would go in turnaround. And now it's at this studio. And now it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, or it's somebody else is writing it. And you've sold your baby. You have no say in any of it. And when you complain about it, it's called sour grapes.
Right.
Even though you created it. They're your characters, it's your story. So I made a lot of money, but money's not enough. Okay. Remember the Russian writer Dostoevsky? Huh? He said, you have to have a relationship with God. You have to be in love, and you have to do something creative to be happy. And I've never forgot. I read that when I was a teenager, and I think about that occasionally. And the happiest times of my life, and money is not part of the equation. I have a relationship with God, and I think I'm living the right way. I'm in love with somebody, and I'm doing creative work. Mm. The money, and I've made lots of money, and I've made no money. I like to be comfortable. And by most people's standards, I make more than most people. But by Hollywood standards, I'm not in their league. But money is not the most important thing. Knowing how to raise money or invest the money is important. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of got to, you got to go through this process and figure out who you are and what you want to say. And I feel today, Jason, like when I was 17 years old, I had a passion for making movies. And I went to a movie theater and I saw the concert for Bangladesh with George Harrison and Bob Dylan. And they were raising money with a record and a concert and a movie to feed starving children in Bangladesh. And to me, that was the greatest thing in the world. And so I went to my church, I went to my pastor, and he said, oh, you shouldn't be worrying about things like that. You should be out chasing girls and throwing a football. And that was sort of the beginning of my estrangement with organized religion. And then I went out to Hollywood. And I said, there are starving children in the world. There are these needless wars. We should make films about, no. We don't want to do that. No. And they laughed at me. I went to a very prestigious prep school in Michigan. And I made a short film about the starving children of Bangladesh. And I got an F in the film class. And they said to me, that's not a movie. So one of my films I'm working on now, I started self-financing. And what I'm doing is I'm doing $25 a day, either in microloans or donations. And the first money I gave was $100 to the George Harrison Fund through UNICEF, because children are still starving to death in Bangladesh.